on my channel, I always tell you, you can get the brochure living videos anywhere. You can click on a video and it's going to tell you everything that's great about Florida. That is not what this channel is about. We deal in real life living. And I just feel like I would want to know these things. If I were moving to your state, I would want you to tell me the good and the bad, and then I can make my own decision if the good is good enough to outweigh the bad. That's what I like to do on this channel. So today we're going to be talking about some things that the locals will tell you if you asked. If you wanted to have the honest truth about living in Florida, this is what the locals would tell you. We're going to begin with number one, which is the bugs are real. The bug thing is a real thing. No-see-ums actually exist. My sister thought that was fake. She thought it was a name that somebody was saying to be cute and that it wasn't a real thing. No-see-ums are real. You cannot see them. They're teeny, teeny, tiny, and you don't even really realize you got bit or stung or whatever it is they do until usually 24 hours later when you have welts. And these welts are so severe that, like, when you itch them, there's a liquid that comes out of them, and I don't really, listen, not a scientist here. Can we all agree? I'm not a doctor. But when you itch them, that hot liquid stuff seems to make it so much worse all over your skin. I don't know if it's poison. Somebody can tell me down in comments. I am not sure. But what I usually do for those bites, a pharmacist told me to combine Benadryl and hydrocortisone. I'm not telling you to go do that, okay? Can we agree again that I am not a pharmacist, but this is what the pharmacist told me to do. So I make like a little mixture of that. I put it on there. It actually works every single time for me. But the bugs that you will get bit or stung by in Florida, if you're not used to it, your body almost has to develop an immunity to these new tropical bugs that you've maybe never been exposed to before. One of the things that I would give you as a tip is if you're somebody that gets bit by everything, I would not go to the beach after it rains. That is one of the worst things you could do. So when that sand is a little bit wet, every bug, every sand flea, every sand fly, white fly, whatever it may be, those stings or bites or whatever it is, absolutely unbearable. So when people say, oh, the bugs, they really aren't that bad, they're that bad. All right, next one, the traffic. Now, this might surprise you. Yes, the traffic is horrendous. Yes, the traffic is sometimes gridlock. Like, for example, I use Fort Myers Beach as an example all the time. It's very hard to get on and off the beach at Fort Myers Beach. 41, also known as Tamiami Trail, gridlock a lot of the times. But here's the thing, especially like in Southwest Florida and even down in the Sarasota area, it's like a grid. So running this way and running this way. So it's pretty easy to find a parallel outlet to get where you want to go. Not always. I'm not saying you can always do that, but I've mentioned this before in a past video. Like, for example, myself, I utilize Livingston a lot instead of 41 because it runs parallel to it. So you're driving parallel, you're getting there, you're just kind of going around. And because it's mainly residential up and down Livingston, you're going to hit far less traffic because there's not all those stoplights, there's not as much start and stop. So usually there's a way to get around something. Sometimes the way to get around something is to not go at certain times of the day. For example, I would not suggest that anyone get on Immokalee, which is in North Naples. I would not get on Immokalee in the really past 2:30, 3 o'clock, or it's going to be gridlock because that's a main thoroughfare that goes up and down. So if you live off of Immokalee, I know any of you out there that live, you know what I'm talking about. It is absolutely gridlock, almost to the point of unbearable. Another example would be Marco Island. The main on and off is going to be the Jolly Bridge, which takes you from Naples to Marco Island. During a hurricane, during an evacuation, during season, absolute gridlock. Now, in an emergency, could you go south? Could you go that direction and take that exit off the island? Yeah, you absolutely could. You're going completely around everything, but if it were an emergency and you're trying to get inland, you could go that direction. But sometimes people don't think about not just the inconvenience of being in traffic, but sort of being trapped in a situation that you don't want to be in. The next one is boating. A lot of people want to come to Florida to boat. And if you're coming to Southwest Florida, if you are coming really anywhere from Tampa south, I'm going to just tell you, you're going to have a heck of a time trying to find somewhere to dock your boat. Most marinas are 100% full, if not every marina. This happens often in my career. I have people that are moving from out of state that want a boat, several times a week, and they can't find anywhere to put their boat. That a lot of times is when people end up in places like Cape Coral because they see the canals. And if you're going to move to Cape Coral, I have a lot of videos on Cape Coral. A lot of times people, again, you don't know what you don't know. So do some research on the areas before you think that Cape Coral is a mini Naples. It is not. Lots of videos out on that as to why. But if you're coming to Florida strictly for boating, then Cape Coral is a good option for you because you can find something on a wide canal. You don't want one of those skinny canals. And you also need to be aware of the miserable mile and how long it takes to get out to open water. You don't want to be idling in the Southwest Florida sunshine, especially if your boat does not have a topper to it and you're not in any sort of shade. It is devastatingly hot if you are idling for 45 minutes through that type of water. But that is a solution. If you're only here to boat, Cape Coral is a good spot where you can get something that's affordable and put the boat essentially in water in your backyard. Again, I would strongly suggest check the waterways. You need to work with an agent that knows the waterways, that knows there's places through these canals that can get low in water. There's places that are difficult to navigate through, like for example, Bonita Springs. There's some spots there that you have Gulf access, but again, it's a really long idle through some skinny little navigable waters, but just barely out into a river and then out to the Gulf. But if you're only here to boat, Cape Coral could be a good solution for you. But if you're thinking you'll just buy anywhere house with a 3-bedroom, 2-bath pool home, and then you'll put your boat at a marina, it's very expensive and it's very, very limiting. We even have things called boating condominiums, so they're not cheap, but that could be an option as well. Red tide. Is red tide really a thing, and is red tide red? The answer is yes and no. Red tide is really a thing. Red tide is not red. It's actually kind of lime green. I've come across it. I have asthma, so sometimes I'll pick it up, many times I'll pick it up before they've even announced it on a website. So if you go to the Lee County, Collier County, Sarasota County, all of these counties have websites that will tell you if red tide is present and where, and they'll locate it by beaches so that if you're going to that beach, you could have a problem. But when I get out of the car in the parking lot, I'll feel it, and it makes you kind of feel like you breathed in a bunch of, sand, burning sand. That's what it does. It gives you like a burning, acidic taste in the back of your mouth, and then you start coughing. I do anyway. Most people do. So red tide is a real thing. I've actually been out in our boat boating, and we're just going through water, and all of a sudden I start coughing because we're going through a patch of red tide that sometimes you can see, sometimes you can't. It's an algae within the water. I'm not a scientist. I don't know how to exactly describe it, but that's what it is. And sometimes you can see it floating on the water, and it's kind of a lime green color. But if you have breathing problems, you really should be aware of that because it can be significant, especially if you want to live on the water. I had a client that I sold a house to in Naples Park. She never mentioned to me that she had COPD. Why would that come up? And she lived pretty close to the beach. In Naples Park, you can get definitely walking distance of the beach. And she wound up in the hospital because she was very, very sensitive to the red tide. So definitely tell your agent if you have any of those breathing things going on, because it does matter. And then let's do one more. The last thing I would say that the locals would tell you if you asked is that you definitely want to do your Christmas shopping. You want to try out new restaurants, try out new stores, do all of that in the off season because the prices do change in the off season for the better. So they're going to be much lower in the off season. That's when you're going to see all the specials. That's when you're going to see deals on cars. I would also suggest that you not buy a car in Naples. I would buy it well outside of Naples, maybe Cape Coral, somewhere like that, Northport, Port Charlotte. You're just going to get better pricing. The more you're into the resorty area, even the grocery stores have higher prices. So that's just a handful of things that the locals would tell you if you asked. I hope you found that helpful, and as always, if I can be of help in any way, let me know. My contact information is always down in the description box.